Hi, I'm Jason, a 21-year-old who's been through more than most my age. Growing up, I always felt like an inconvenience, especially after my parents' divorce when I was 10. My life became a game of ping pong, bouncing between homes, feeling like a forgotten item on a to-do list. My mom quickly got involved with a new boyfriend, and my dad remarried soon after. It felt like they both moved on, leaving me in the background, as if they had forgotten they had a son who still needed a place to call home. When my mom decided to pack up my room into boxes, she didn't even look me in the eye. "Jason, you'll stay with your dad for a while," she said flatly, as though I was a chore she could hand off. My dad wasn't any better. When I showed up at his house, bags in hand, he muttered under his breath, "Your mom should be taking care of this, not me." The back and forth between them continued, each stay becoming shorter, their patience thinner. It wasn't long before my dad suggested, with barely hidden relief, "You know, Jason, maybe it would be easier if you stayed with your Aunt Marie for a while, just until we figure things out." Living with Aunt Marie was a revelation. Her home was modest, but her heart was massive. "You're welcome here as long as you need, Jason," she said the first time I walked through her door, and for the first time in years I felt wanted. One night, the weight of my parents' neglect hit me hard, and I couldn't help but ask, "Why don't they want me, Aunt Marie?" She looked at me, her expression soft but firm. "It's not about you, Jason. It's their loss, not yours," she said, her words soothing my aching heart in a way I hadn't experienced before. Staying with Aunt Marie wasn't just about having a roof over my head. It was about finding a sense of belonging. Every morning, she'd make pancakes, her signature start to the day, and every evening, she'd sit with me at the kitchen table, helping with homework. She wasn't just a caretaker. She was my biggest supporter and toughest critic rolled into one. "You're smarter than you think, Jason. Apply yourself and you'll go far," she'd say, urging me to dig deeper in my studies. Her belief in me pushed me to excel, and soon, I wasn't just getting good grades. I was proving to myself that I was more than the kid my parents had left behind. As I grew older, my parents became even more distant. Phone calls on birthdays or a holiday card were the extent of their effort, and each time they reached out, it felt more like an obligation they were trying to check off. "Hey, Sporthouse School," Dad would ask with an almost robotic detachment. "It's going well, thanks," I'd reply, keeping it short because we both knew the conversation wouldn't last long. After each call, I was left with an emptiness that lingered a bit longer each time. But Aunt Marie filled the gaps they left behind. She was there for everything. My first soccer goal, my high school graduation, every milestone in between. "It's not where you come from, Jason. It's where you're going." She'd remind me whenever I felt the sting of my parents' indifference. By the time I was ready for college, I had become a strong, independent young man, thanks largely to her influence. She helped me with applications, drove me to college orientations, and celebrated with me when the acceptance letters came in. "We did it, Aunt Marie," I told her the day I got my acceptance to State University. "We sure did, kiddo," she replied, her eyes misty with pride. Moving into my college dorm was bittersweet. As I waved goodbye to Aunt Marie from the door, I knew that no matter where life took me, her lessons and love would always be with me, guiding me. During my sophomore year, I got a call that shook me. My grandfather had passed away. I hadn't seen much of him since my parents split, but I had always loved him. His death hit hard, but what really surprised me was what came next. My grandfather had left me $1 million in his will. Sitting in the lawyer's office, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, grief, disbelief, and a strange sense of validation. "Your grandfather always spoke highly of you, Jason. He believed in your future," the lawyer told me as he handed me the documents. I was overwhelmed. My grandfather had seen something in me, even from a distance, that my own parents had failed to recognize. The inheritance wasn't just money. It felt like a reward for all the pain caused by my parents' neglect, a recognition of my worth. But along with the inheritance came an unexpected twist. My parents suddenly reappeared in my life, their newfound affection overwhelming and insincere. Jason, we've missed you so much, my mom gushed, her sudden warmth jarring. Over the phone, her voice trembled with an emotion that didn't quite align with her words. We were just thinking about how long it's been since we all got together, Dad added, as if years of distance and neglect could simply be brushed aside. The timing of their sudden interest in reconnecting seemed far too convenient, too coincidental to be genuine. It was obvious they were aware of the inheritance, and it pained me to realize that this newfound attention was likely driven by that knowledge. The $1 million had suddenly made me a focal point. The frequency of their calls and messages increased, each one laced with faint concern and hollow pleasantries. "We should catch up, Jason. It's been too long," Mom would say, but beneath her words, I could hear the unspoken message clearly. We should talk about that money. I found myself caught in a tough spot, torn between two opposing emotions. The deep-seated desire to have my parents back in my life, and the nagging suspicion that their motivations were entirely financial. The internal conflict was emotionally exhausting. I leaned heavily on Aunt Marie's wisdom, a constant source of stability. "They're your parents, Jason, but be careful," she cautioned, her protective nature always at the forefront. People don't change overnight. As the reality of my parents' intentions became clearer, I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. I knew I couldn't avoid it. I would have to confront their sudden change of heart head-on. The thought of it filled me with dread, but I knew this was no longer just a family reunion. It was a battle for my peace of mind and the integrity of my future. The pressure built rapidly after my parents re-entered my life. With each conversation, their attempts to steer the subject toward finances became more and more obvious. It wasn't long before the veil was lifted entirely. During a particularly blunt phone call, my father finally laid out their true intentions with unsettling clarity. "Jason, I've got some debts that have piled up, and your siblings need support for their education. You have the means to help," Dad said, his voice a strange mix of casualness and desperation. The word family suddenly became a weapon, wielded with precision to guilt me into opening my wallet. At first, I was shocked by the directness of his request, but the surprise quickly morphed into frustration. "We haven't really been a family for years, Dad. Why am I only hearing from you now? And only because you need something," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's not like that, Jason. We've always cared about you," Mom chimed in, her tone soft and soothing, but lacking the sincerity I so desperately needed to hear. The conversation escalated quickly into a confrontation. I challenged their sudden affection head-on. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect me to solve your problems. Where were you when I needed you?" I demanded, my voice hardening as years of pent-up emotion spilled out. "We made mistakes, Jason. We're trying to make things right," Dad replied, his voice strained and defensive. But their apologies felt empty, their reasons transparent and self-serving. The more we talked, the more obvious it became that they weren't interested in rebuilding our relationship. They were interested in my money. My resolve strengthened. I thought of Aunt Marie, who had provided me with the stability and love I needed all those years, without expecting anything in return. That was what family was supposed to be. "No," I finally said, the word solidifying my decision as it left my lips. "I can't help you. I have my own life to build, and responsibilities that don't include fixing your mistakes." The silence that followed was telling. The disappointment in their voices was palpable. But with the pain of the confrontation came a deep sense of relief. I had finally stood up for myself, establishing boundaries that had been long overdue. As I sat back, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me, I recognized this as a pivotal moment, one that would forever redefine the dynamics of our relationship. I was no longer the child left behind. I was an adult, taking control of my life and my choices. The confrontation, though painful, was necessary. It marked a significant turning point in my journey, reinforcing my independence and my commitment to live a life defined not by the past, but by the values and people who truly mattered. With my decision made, I knew I had to ensure my future and my inheritance were protected. I met with a lawyer to discuss the situation and my intentions. I wanted to invest wisely, securing both my future and Aunt Marie's as well. The lawyer guided me through setting up trusts and investment accounts that would safeguard the money and allow it to grow responsibly. Let's make sure your financial future is as secure as possible, Jason. You've got a good head on your shoulders, the lawyer said, approving of my plans to prioritize long-term investments in education. With the legal protections in place, I felt a profound sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I was making decisions entirely on my own, free from manipulation or guilt. Returning home to Aunt Marie, the woman who had been my rock through it all, I sat at our old kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared countless meals and conversations. I told her everything. Aunt Marie, I've taken care of the inheritance, I said, pausing before continuing. There's something else. I've set up a fund for us, for the home improvements you've always talked about. And maybe, finally, a trip to Europe like you've always dreamed. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Jason, you didn't have to do that. I didn't take care of you for any of this. I know, Marie, I replied, my voice thick with emotion, but you gave me a family when I had none. You deserve everything and more. In that moment, the realization of what family truly meant became clearer than ever. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about who stood by you during your lowest moments, who supported you without conditions, and who loved you unconditionally. Aunt Marie was my family in every way that mattered. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, I understood that the challenges I had faced with my parents were not just obstacles. They were valuable lessons that had fortified my resolve and deepened my understanding of loyalty and love. As I looked toward the future, I felt more confident and secure in who I was and in my ability to navigate whatever life might bring. With Aunt Marie by my side and a clear path ahead, I was ready to embrace new possibilities. True wealth, I realized, wasn't measured by my bank account. It was measured by the relationships that endured and the resilience I had gained. The clarity about what truly mattered and the strength to stand up for myself were the real inheritances from my grandfather and father. These lessons would guide me long after the money was spent, ensuring that I lived a life rich in love and integrity, a life that Aunt Marie and I would build together. Now, here's a question for you. Is it ever justifiable to cut off family members financially if they only show interest when they want something? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content. Let's continue the conversation and explore these complex family dynamics together.